another edition of Ask Michael Ehline. This is where I teach people the law in an unorthodox manner by using examples that we see in the news, case law briefs, but it's all about exposing the Leviathan and its instrumentalities and taking back your rights. Know the law and mean to keep it well. Come here to learn from an expert to know your right. Make sure to like and subscribe. Make sure to save, because we never know when the thought police are going to take down this channel.
How's it going, guys? I am attorney Michael Ehline. As you guys know, I primarily do personal injury law in California and Texas, car accidents, big rigs, some elder abuse, but I also do some civil rights, and I got my start doing criminal and got into criminal defense. And so I'm an expert when it comes to habeas corpus, writs, and appeals. And so today we're gonna go over the history of American common law jurisprudence with respect to habeas corpus. And I was inspired to do this particular show because of what's going on with with Lane Myers over in, I think it's Pima County, Arizona. So I'm not licensed to practice law in Arizona. I'm not giving you legal advice about what to do in Arizona. I'm presenting this as general legal principles, the same way that a law professor would in law school. And so I will share with you my lay opinions of what I think of what codes and statutes would apply there, but I'm not rendering any legal advice or practicing law with respect to what I would do or how to do it in Arizona in particular. So just general legal principles of how I would handle this if I was handling a case involving someone who has been unlawfully incarcerated. Okay, so hopefully some of you guys will join me. I started the show a little early today because I'm feeling a little better. As a lot of you guys know, I've got a really bad bulging disc, so I'm at a standing desk and I'm doing my best to be able to share this information with you as best I can. I shared a bunch of shorts earlier this morning about the show I did yesterday about different things that I see wrong with this case if I was handling it in California or Texas with respect to Lane. I feel that the harassment statute is vague and ambiguous on its face, and in its application, it's being unjustly applied. And hey, Randy, good seeing you. Yeah, well, I appreciate you saying that. I've got a lot of blowback because I've made it clear that I think that if Lane would tone it down a little bit and not cut people off and cuss and swear and stuff, I think he'd have a better chance at winning in court. And so, but that's just because I'm a lawyer, but it doesn't mean that I am in any way putting him down or insulting him. I just want him to be able to win. And I know that being locked up because people are scared of you makes it harder for you to win. Give me a bunch of ones if you guys agree with that. So what I'm going to do really quick is, just so you guys know, I don't have any skin in the game. I don't know Lane. I've never met the guy. I'm more about trying to make sure there's an even and fair application of justice in this country. And right now, I'm not seeing that in my mind. In my opinion, that's not what's happening here. So what I'm going to do is just really quickly give you the history of habeas corpus in American common law. And so I know there's a lot of people who are sovereign citizens or whatever you want to call it, and they don't really know what common law means. Okay, so there's basically two types of common law that we understand in American jurisprudence. One would be the common law interpretation of like stare decisis or case precedents. And basically, it just means that a case was decided like the Heller case, right? DC versus Heller, and then the later Heller versus DC cases on the Second Amendment, where Heller became the seminal case on whether or not private citizens have the right to keep and bear arms. And we know that Democrats for years have been trying to say that only the government should have firearms and trying to restrict how much ammunition you can have. And many people say that that's no different than what Mao Zedong did. You disarm your population, it's easier to control them, right? So, and that's another conversation for another day. But the issue is common law That's one form of common law. Common law, stare decisis. Okay, but what common law, the nexus of common law, is that prior to civilian attorneys and solicitors or barristers in England, which is where American common law comes from, except as abrogated by our Constitution, by our Bill of Rights, right? Natural law, started when, so you had basically, I think it was King Henry, didn't like it that the Pope, had too much sway in his kingdom. And basically all you had was ecclesiastical courts, and you had bishops or whatever. They were basically the lawyers of the day. And then you had commoners, because of the influx of the Germanic tribes, the Anglos and the Saxons, the Danes, the Danelaw. They had their own system of jurisprudence as well. You like trial by battle, and we can get into that in another show. But ultimately, as time progressed, you had William the Conqueror come in. You basically had the kings of England evolve into basically kicking out the Pope's people, and the king had his own law, right? Lex Rex, right? And so the king had his own courts, but the commoners still didn't have their own courts. And ultimately, over time, it evolved to where you had attorneys, and all for the common man. So that's what it really means. It just means the commoner's law. That's all common law means, guys. Just the commoner's law. That's the original common law. Hopefully you guys understand that. So now we get into, and I'm going to play some videos, some lawyer reaction videos, but I'm just going to give you a brief history based upon my understanding of common law. Then I'm going to show you a video from the 10th Amendment Center, and then I'm going to get into another one by a guy who is a sort of a self-professed lawyer. In fact, let me see. Let me get you his name really quick. He calls himself Bad Wolf Unincorporated. And I was impressed with his video, so I definitely want to share it with you. And I want to also encourage you guys to like and subscribe to his channel, of course. And he's somebody who helps people do their own writs of habeas corpus when they're in prison. And so we'll get into what a habeas corpus is. Most of you kind of know what it is, but I'll help you understand right now if you don't. So habeas corpus is often called the Great Writ, and it has a rich history in American common law, and it's deeply rooted in English common law tradition. Its core purpose is to protect individual liberty by allowing a person detained or imprisoned to challenge the legality and validity of their confinement before a court. And I'm going to give you just a really brief history of how it evolved into the American context. It traces its root, habeas corpus traces its roots back to medieval England. It emerged as a mechanism to prevent arbitrary detention by the king's men, by the crown, by the state, okay, or local authorities. Its formalization is often tied to the Magna Carta of 1215. And many people don't know that, the king was beheaded by his subjects for violating the people's rights, but people still wanted a king. It's somehow or another, having a powerful, strong, centralized government seems to be deeply seated in the minds and psyche of people. Many people say that humans are herding animals and they always want a leader. And of course, true American patriots fight that. They don't like that. We want less government and more freedom. And so that's why people like me have a real problem with the left, because they want more and more control over our lives. They want to know how much money we make. They want, if you buy a Bible and now you're reported by FinCEN as being a potential domestic violent extremist, if you buy a Bible with your credit card. So there's like this battle back and forth. And so the modern left would be akin to the Federalists, like the Hamiltonians, and then the modern libertarians like myself would be equated to the Jeffersonians, the anti-federalists. Hopefully that makes sense. So it's just been a battle like a seesaw back and forth. So by the 14th century, English courts were issuing writs of habeas corpus and subjiciendum. Yes, it's a Latin word. Here, I'm going to put these words in the chat for you, just to make it easier for you to understand. Oh boy, my goodness. All right. So there you go. You can see for yourself, Randy. And now, it basically means you shall have the body to submit. Okay. Habeas corpus ad subjiciendum. Subjiciendum means you shall have the body to submit. See, us lawyers get paid big money to know Latin words, right? And it was to compel your jailer to bring prisoners before a judge and justify their detention. The Habeas Corpus Act of 1679 solidified its role in English law, and it ensured swift judicial review of imprisonment and curbing abuses of power. So that's a lot of people are asking me, can Lane do this? Is this a procedure that Lane could do? And yes, it absolutely is, and he could do it from jail right now today. Now, whether it would be granted, many people say that the entire Arizona court is corrupt, and that they're all buddies with law enforcement and the prosecutors, and you won't get justice in the state court. So there is a way to get justice going federal as well by filing for a federal habeas, or maybe even a writ of certiorari if you can't win at the state level. There's prohibitions and mandate writs you can also potentially file in a case like this. All right. Now, when the English colonists brought their legal traditions to America, because remember, Americans are basically the offspring of the English. Habeas corpus came with them. It became a cornerstone of colonial justice. It depending on what colony you were in. Remember, a lot of the colonials hated the king, and they hated any kind of English justice because they didn't feel like it was just. Anytime you have centralized power, you have great injustice, right? When you put all this power into one person, and that's why we have checks and balances in this country. But basically, this is a sentiment that would later fuel the American Revolution. The lack of habeas corpus, that the king had suspended the habeas corpus. And this is why many people believe that the war between the states was unlawful, and that the current United States incorporeal government is unlawful ever since Abraham Lincoln, because he illegally suspended the habeas corpus. I don't know if any of you guys understand what happened, but hey, good seeing you, Christopher. Thanks, bro. Trying to look squared away today. I'm a lawyer after all. So that's the point I'm trying to make. And this is like, I got a lot of blowback. Yeah, you shouldn't tell Lane not to cuss and swear and cut people off in court. I'm like, no, no, no. When you're in court, you should behave in a certain manner that does not that does not put you in a position where a jury is going to think you're a crazy person and automatically just think you're guilty. I've learned a long time ago from Norman Vincent Peale, Zig Ziglar, Tom Hopkins, How to Master the Art of Selling, that it's best to always be courteous and considerate and kind, even to your adversary. And when you are courteous and considerate and kind to your adversary, even though you might hate their guts, it takes away an enormous amount of firepower from them. And also, when you're angry and upset and seething, it's very difficult for you to make cogent arguments, because anger can completely destroy your ability to make proper arguments, and you'll start making conclusory arguments instead of just staying with the facts. And so look, I make the same mistakes too, just like anybody else. I'm a human being. But yeah, looking the part is important too. If you're going to go into court, I believe you definitely should wear a suit, should always wear a tie, and you should be squared away, whether you're a lawyer or not. Because remember, it's the American common law tradition. Our founding fathers set these courts up for us. You can argue First Amendment. You have the right to go in there and get crazy. But most jurors, the people who are going to be hearing your case, are going to be of the mind that if you look squared away, you're respectful, you don't talk back, you don't cut the judge off, you don't cut the court personnel off, they're going to be of the mind that I can relate to this guy. Because remember, that's basically what you're doing. When you get hailed into court, you have to sell yourself, not just your case, but you have to sell yourself. Give me a bunch of ones if you guys agree with that. And Randy, you can say it, man. Thanks, Christopher. That's cool. So Christopher says I look good with my tie on. Well, and it's a pretty cool tie. I've had this tie for years. I think I got it actually at the Nordstrom rack years ago in Costa Mesa, California. And ties, you got to hold on to them because they go in and out, right? A fad, like right now, the real skinny ties are coming back in. But I kind of like this one, and it's a little thick, but it's kind of cut off, so all you see is the top part. But I appreciate the compliment, bro. So, anyways, let me just finish up about So basically, habeas, like many of our laws, were adopted from English common law again, except were abrogated by our Bill of Rights and natural law. See, that was the big problem with the king. Is the king was a Leviathanist. He supported the Hobbesian philosophy of a great Leviathan, where the king is appointed by God and has absolute authority. And that's very similar to what the woke and the left have done in this country. They want to control the education system. They want to tell boys that they're girls, tell girls that they're boys, dictate that from the top from these large corporations that pay them, like BlackRock, for example, in my opinion, a bunch of pervs, and have a centralized control over what you can think, what you have to inject into your body. And if you disagree, you're a crazy person and you should be put on a potential domestic violent extremist list. If you say anything negative about illegal alien invaders who are having their way with your women and attacking your children, that means that you're a racist or a bigot and you need to be put in prison. And a prime example of that would be what's going on in the United Kingdom today. They still have the Hobbesian style justice system, and they flooded their country with foreigners who are hostile to the natives. And when the natives are speaking up against it, they're being arrested and thrown in prison. And this is where habeas corpus would come into play. So, but we have a little bit different interpretation because, see, the American colonists, they wanted more of the Magna Carta. You see, and the king didn't. The king always wanted to strip the people of their rights. And people say, well, the king doesn't have any power. He's just the king is just a what do they call that? Figurehead is not what it seems. That one, the Sex Pistols song Figurehead, right? Um, no future. Remember the Sex Pistols, guys? So, but the king actually does have an enormous amount of power. The king can dissolve parliament, and my understanding is he recently dissolved Canada's parliament, and they put in another big World Economic Forum guy, globalist, to replace Trudeau, who spent a bunch of time at Epstein Island, right? So you can see why these guys hate Trump, because he's trying to prosecute all these bankers and billionaires, people that went to Epstein Island, and there's all, the FBI concealed it under Biden and Obama, and now we're finding out that Obama was going to these P Diddy parties, and they're all the same kind of people. Anyways, it's just all this crazy stuff going on. And so, after independence, the framers of the U.S. Constitution enshrined habeas corpus in Article 1, Section 9, Clause 2. The privilege of the writ of habeas corpus shall not be suspended unless when in cases of rebellion or invasion, the public safety may require it. All right. This clause didn't create the writ, but simply recognized it as a pre-existing right as an Englishman. And remember, most of the colonists were proud to be Englishmen. They thought that the king had betrayed the people, right? I'm sure you guys see that. A lot of people say that's why Trump won the last election, right? You had the FBI targeting parents if they didn't want their kids to be, transgendered by these radical lefty public school teachers. And a lot of these people felt like they were betrayed by their government. But in this case, they were able to vote. But in that case, they weren't, because the king actually took away the colonists' power of representation in parliament. So there was a little bit, see what I mean? Little nuance there. So this was basically just a pre-existing right that was inherited from the English common law, and it signaled its importance to the new republic. Now, early American courts leaned heavily on English precedent or English precedent to shape habeas corpus practice, right? The pre-existing case law became adopted by the colonists because, after all, they came from an English justice system. Are you following me so far? Hey, Simba Base, good seeing you. And hey, Mr. Osgood, Liberty Absurdity. Hey, yeah, that's right. Everybody hit that like and subscribe button, Reluctant Prophet and Liberty Absurdity. Thanks for joining me today, guys. Everybody give me a bunch of ones for Reluctant Prophet, and everybody give him a bunch of love, and go to his channel and like and subscribe for doing his best to support personal liberty and individual rights for people like Lane Myers. It's very, very important that if someone's different and they're nonconformists, that even though they act the way they act, that we support them. And Lane Myers is a prime example of that. He's outspoken, but he's super intelligent. He's super smart. And I think that if if things were different, I would like to train him on the law study program and help him become a lawyer with no law degree or undergrad, because I think that he's got the legal mind to do it. As I also think somebody like Chile de Castro would be a great candidate to be a lawyer. And all I would do is I would just try to temper their personalities so that they can be better advocates, advocati in court. Super, super important. But I don't want to digress too much. All right. But everybody, please thank Reluctant Prophet, as well as this is a public service, for all the hard work that they've been doing to put a spotlight on what they believe is grave injustice in the Arizona judicial system, as well as the Arizona basically public governance system in general, which a lot of people believe is being driven by outsiders like people from New York City, New York, coming in and buying off mayors and political candidates and things of that nature. So I really love it when people are brave enough to expose this kind of stuff. Because look, you risk going to jail. I mean, we look what happened to the Proud Boys founder. They called him a white supremacist, right? And this is a guy who would go and fight against Antifa, who we now know was funded by organizations like USAID, like Antifa, a hardcore communist Marxist group of people getting funds directly and indirectly from USAID, from US taxes, and then going out and burning down cities, attacking people with Trump MAGA hats, and then Biden saying, "Oh, there's nothing I can do because they're not really an organized organization," and just kind of let them do whatever they want, almost like the Nazi SA, the enforcement arm, but for his party. But as far as the Proud Boys goes, well, they were white supremacists. But the problem is the founder of the Proud Boys is a black dude from Cuba. So, that's why oh gosh, there's so many things I have to say about that, but we'll get into that at another time. So early American courts leaned heavily on English precedent to shape habeas practice. So in Ex parte versus Watkins, which is an 1830 case, the Supreme Court affirmed that federal courts could issue the writ to review detentions under federal authority, even though it was limited in its scope to jurisdictional questions rather than the broader issue of justice. But key developments propped up. In the Civil War, it was suspended. The most famous suspension happened during 1861, when Abraham Lincoln suspended the writ to detain Confederate sympathizers without a trial, and this sparked a constitutional debate. Chief Justice Roger Taney, in Ex parte versus Merriman, which is an 1861 case, ruled that only Congress, not the president, could suspend the habeas, but Lincoln ignored that decision. See, that's why we have a problem. So remember, who makes the laws? Who makes the laws? Congress does, not the president. The president can sign the legislation, but so most scholars, including myself, don't believe that Lincoln had the power to suspend the habeas corpus. So anyways, Lincoln ignored that case and he cited wartime necessity, which is ridiculous. But later, when the Congress was packed with Republicans, of course, after the fact, Congress went ahead and ratified the suspension in 1863, highlighting the tension between liberty and security. Now, remember, the Republicans are the party of anti-slavery. The Democrats are the party of slavery, right? We know, that was the problem. So he didn't have enough Democrat votes, so he just did it on his own. And then after the war, he packed all of the Southern courts with newly freed black slaves without being elected as congressmen and senators, as sort of a slap in the face. And carpetbaggers, basically unelected officials. He just packed all those legislatures in the South. And that's how he was able to pass the 14th Amendment and whatnot and get it ratified. So, which a lot of people say is also unjust because they were unelected people. Now, expansion via the statute. The Judiciary Act of 1789 granted federal courts the power to issue habeas writs, but its scope expanded over time, and the Habeas Corpus Act of 1867 extended federal habeas jurisdiction to state prisoners. So this would be, because Lane Myers is a state prisoner, so definitely habeas would apply to him. And this simply allows federal courts to review state convictions or being just held against your will, right? For violations of federal law or constitutional rights. And this was a major shift, and this was in 1789. Now, post-Civil War and Reconstruction, habeas became a tool to protect the freed slaves and enforce civil rights against hostile state governments. Remember, a lot of the southern states were still forcing these slaves to work on their plantations against their will. They just weren't letting them go. You guys understand so far what's going on? Let me see. Let's see. What time did you start? Because I have Christopher. You know what, brother? I don't know what's going on. I just think YouTube is not sending out notifications. I'm probably unpopular with the far left Google and YouTube people. They don't probably want my message of individual rights and personal freedom getting out. I can't think of any other reason. Um, but yes, I think so, Simba B. Simba B says, the more I learn of the law, the more I believe we live in lawless times. Well, there's also a saying that when you live in a society where laws are so voluminous, like we have now, everyone's a lawbreaker, everyone's a criminal. So that's another problem. I mean, you can't even walk out your door without breaking some kind of a law, and it's that centralized control that's always the problem. And if you get some scumbag in power like a Trudeau, you'll have him arresting you, forcing you to take injections. Once they get digital currency, shutting down your bank account, forcing you to live in a 15-minute city. And this goes against everything that our founding fathers stood for. It's more of a Hamiltonian approach. I don't want to digress too far. So basically, federal courts used it to counter Southern resistance to Reconstruction, though its effectiveness waned as political will waned. Now, in the 20th century, there was a refinement of habeas law. The Supreme Court gradually broadened habeas review. In Brown versus Allen, a 1953 case, it ruled that federal courts could rehear constitutional claims already decided by state courts. Okay, so think about that. How that would apply to Lane Meyer's case. If a judge has already decided, for example, an anti-SLAPP, a free speech that applies in a criminal case, and the judge just sua sponte throws it out, well, Lane might be able to argue Brown versus Allen, 1953, federally, all right? It ruled that federal courts could rehear constitutional claims already decided by state courts, amplifying the writ's role in safeguarding due process. However, concerns about judicial overload led to restrictions. The Anti-Terrorism and Effective Death Penalty Act, ADEPA of 1996, imposed strict deadlines in deference to state court rulings. Now, the modern role, all right? Today, habeas corpus in American law primarily serves as a post-conviction remedy, especially in federal courts reviewing like a death penalty case, all right? Or claims of unconstitutional imprisonment. And that's probably Lane's argument, is that he's unconstitutionally being imprisoned for exercising his free speech rights. And also the fact that the statute, the definition of harassment itself, is subject to any degree of interpretation depending on who the person is. If you're a leftist and you believe in the English system or the German system, which is what they believe pretty much in California. Now, you go to San Francisco or Berkeley or any left-wing college campus, I mean, it's unbelievable. Oh, I'm offended. Oh, it's hate speech. It's hate speech if you offend someone, and therefore you should be thrown in jail. And that's the British, the UK, European model. But the American model was always about, who gives an F if you're offended? Go F yourself. So it's a different sort of mentality. Yeah, it may not be something that is going to enamor yourself to people at someone's birthday party or a wedding, but you have the right to be an a-hole in America or insult someone, even call some the N-word, but you might have to face the consequences of getting the crap beaten out of you. You follow me? That's a whole other story, but you've got the right to do it. I'm not saying I would ever do it. I think that would be a really bad move. It wouldn't be too good for your career either, but it remains a vital check on government overreach, though its application has been narrowed by procedural hurdles and statutory limits. So, in essence, habeas corpus in American common law developed from the English common law system, except where otherwise abrogated by American common law, our Bill of Rights, and natural law. So that's pretty much what it's all about. Does anybody have any questions before I get into this video from the 10th Amendment Center? Because it's a really good video, and I want to make sure that you guys have a good understanding. Yeah, I get it, Simba B. Simba B says that is why we relate to Lane and his plight. Me too. And you guys can see I'm nothing like Lane. All right. I'm not. I'm totally different in my approach, the way I handle things. But I think the guy's pretty cool. And I love watching his videos. And I love it that he's so brave and bold, and that he stands up tall for himself. And my father always told me, Mike, always be defined. Be who you are. Don't ever try to change yourself for other people. Now, that being said, being civil, being courteous, considerate, and kind isn't really changing yourself for other people. What it's doing is it's helping you win. Remember that. You can still be who you are, but in order to win a court case, there's a certain way that you have to do it. Now, I'm not saying that he can't win from jail, but I think it would have been better if he was out right now on a computer watching this video, hopefully, and getting some ideas from it. I don't even think they have access to YouTube or videos in jail. And so it seriously is hampering his ability to defend himself. And I do believe, in my opinion, the reason why he's being treated like this is because he's so brash and bold and outspoken. And the court system and the prosecutors look at that as being he's rebellious. As Obama would say, he's a potential domestic violent extremist because anybody who stands up for their families, the Second Amendment, their ability to defend their rights, goes against like Biden flooding the country with illegal aliens, especially a guy like Lane who was always wearing a "Make America Great Again" hat. Guys like him are looked at by leftists as a potential domestic violent extremist. That's just a fact. FinCEN, there was a report recently, I think last year, Congress came out and they exposed that the Biden administration was deliberately targeting Christians, gun owners, people who shopped at Cabela's or Dick's Sporting Goods, and labeling them as domestic violent extremists and literally putting them on like these no-fly or fly watch lists. When you go to the airport, they always secondary you and they put these little S's on your pass. That's how you know you've been targeted. And I did a video about that, and it absolutely is 100% true. And I'm curious if Trump has removed our names from that list, because obviously if you travel to a country like El Salvador, well, their version of the TSA is also scrutinizing, well, America says this person might be a domestic violent extremist. And then all of a sudden you're in a jail cell with a bunch of MS-13 gang members, right? So, it's really dangerous how the left in particular has targeted free speech to the point now where if you speak your mind, you're considered to be a domestic violent extremist. Give me a bunch of ones if you agree with that. Now, right on, Brent Shimko. Thank you, Life Under the Microscope. Thank you for joining me today. Simba B says, I was taught that I am responsible for my actions and I cannot control other people. Well, unfortunately, the deep state, the administrative state wants to control you. And if you want to see an example of where we're headed if we continue to allow centralized control over our lives, look at what's going on. Look at what happened with Gavin Newsom. I mean, truckers protested against being forced to take this injection. And what did he do? He labeled them violent extremists, shut down their bank accounts, and refused to allow them to work. Now, that is fascism. And now we know with RFK getting in there and exposing, and I can't even say the word on YouTube because they're so enamored with the World Health Organization that if you even question these things, they'll ban your account and they'll give you a strike. They'll say that you're engaged in medical disinformation. Think about that, how powerful these billionaires are. And by the way, you know that, for example, Big Pharma, they're immune from being sued for negligence. And that was Ronald Reagan who signed that law. So they can literally do whatever the hell they want. Good luck suing them. And they've been found guilty. I think it was Pfizer. It was a $2.8 billion punitive damages. Was it punitive damages or no? It was a criminal damages award against Pfizer for lying about their you-know-whats. And that was several years ago. And that's covered up by the press because, well, the legacy news media, who pays for the legacy news media, right? Who are their primary sponsors? Who sponsored the Grammy Awards? Saw this big thing at the top, Pfizer, right? Do you really think that, when someone who's immune from being sued, so they don't have to fend off lawsuits, they have a war chest of advertising money, right? A war chest of advertising money. So do you really think that CNN or PMSNBC is going to tell you the truth about it or allow the truth to come out? No, they'll target anyone who goes against their sponsors. And that's what they've done. So let me see. Sin City Giggle says, when you stand on your God-given natural born rights, police say you're combative and uncooperative. And I would say that is a fair statement. However, there is a way that you can stand on your rights without appearing to be combative. And so that's something that I try to push with people is that, hey, look, there's another way to do it. If you start cussing and swearing, I did another video about this, when I was taking my CCW course, one of my buddies who was in MARSOC, Marine Special Operations, he taught me CCW and all that stuff to get my concealed carry weapon permit. And the first thing he said is, look, if you're being attacked and you draw down, you start saying, get the F away, F you, mother effer, I'm going to F in this and F in that. That loud language, right, would make any witness automatically consider you to be the initial aggressor, because people react to that aggression in your voice. And they, especially, I hate to say it's females in particular, you get aggressive, they automatically consider you to be the aggressor. So if you have somebody like that on your jury, you're going to have some problems. So, when you're drawn down, it's like, sir, please don't come at me anymore. Sir, I'll be forced to defend myself. Please don't make me do this. Please don't make me defend myself. Then you're pleading with someone as opposed to commanding them and yelling and screaming at them. And you're better off before a jury. Give me a bunch of ones if you guys believe what I said, or give me a bunch of twos if you think that I'm full of crap. And thank you, Life Under the Microscope. Yeah, Joe Cool. I would say left wing, right wing, not necessarily the same bird. For example, Second Amendment cases, it's only the right wing justices that are upholding any semblance of the Second Amendment. The left wing justices are doing everything they can to make it to where you can't have a standard capacity magazine in your AR-15. I did a Judge Van Dyke video a couple of weeks, maybe a week ago, where he talked about the ridiculous Bruin decision interpretations by the en banc Ninth Circuit. But I would say, as a general rule, they are parts of the two heads of the same snake, but the left is off the cliff with their woke nonsense and their anti-white racism, telling little boys that they're girls, putting tampon machines in the men's restroom, saying that boys can compete in female sports, men can compete in female sports, and characterizing anyone who disagrees as a racist or a bigot or something. It's ridiculous. I mean, I have met maybe 2 or 3 women in my life who could kick the crap out of me, and it's generally because they're highly trained martial artists, and that's in judo or mixed martial arts. But as a general rule, men are just genetically stronger than women, and they can cause great harm and damage, especially to girls, when they're trying to do volleyball or play basketball. And they just throw these little girls around like rag dolls. It's no wonder why they're winning all of these trophies and awards. So what a joke. I mean, give me a bunch of ones if you think that it's absurd that our government under Biden actually allowed men to compete in female sports. How ridiculous is that? Why don't they create their own league, to allow that to happen, instead of forcing parents like me to have to pull our daughters out of the sports team, and because they're being forced to get their head smashed in by some overgrown boy who's suffering from gender dysphoria, right? He's literally having people suffering from gender dysphoria, and then they get to go in the locker room with your daughter while they're showering. And in California, they put men who put women's clothes on and makeup and drag queen guys in the women's prisons. And now these women are all getting pregnant, and then they're suing the state of California, and have these little, it's just ridiculous. So anyways, let's get into the next video. But thanks for all the ones. Give me a bunch of twos if you guys think that I'm a racist, bigot, and a homophobe because I want to protect women from men who are suffering from gender dysphoria. Give me a bunch of twos if you think that I'm a bigot for wanting men to not play in female sports, men suffering from gender dysphoria, not competing against women, and not being able to share locker rooms or be put in a female prison, right? Overgrown, powerful men who dress up like women and say, I'm a woman, so therefore you have to put me in a jail with a bunch of women. Give me a bunch of twos if you think that makes me bigoted for not wanting that to happen. Yeah. But okay, so far I don't see anything. So it sounds like I've got some pretty squared away people in my audience. So let's get into the 10th Amendment Center video so you can learn a different perspective on what habeas corpus is all about.
Here, I've always been a big fan of the 10th Amendment, and it's great the 10th Amendment Center exists, and it's great that this event exists. I think that it's quite a shame how many left liberals find the very idea of nullification so icky, when in fact they've been some of the most successful at it. We have all these sanctuary cities where city governments refuse to go along with federal immigration laws. That's nullification. We have, of course, the medical marijuana situation in California, where despite the Supreme Court saying you can't do that, the state of California says, yes, we can. That's nullification too. Of course, the librarians who destroyed all those records rather than turn them over because of unconstitutional national security letters, that was also nullification. So it's funny how successful civil liberties and civil rights have been protected when the federal government's ignored. I think that some of this has to do with this idea that the central government actually protects our rights, in particular better than the state governments. Now, of course, I'm not a big fan of state governments. But they are smaller than the federal government, and they're much less murderous, as Scott pointed out. But the state governments sometimes do go a bit far, and I think one very important civil liberty to kind of think of this whole topic is one that I don't hear many people talk about on the question of decentralism or centralism, and that's habeas corpus. We've just seen both the Bush administration and the Obama administration do everything they can to counter the principles of habeas corpus, these principles that are as important as any principles of law and liberty devised in Western history. The principle that you can't just lock someone up and not even explain why. I mean, that's basically what it comes down to. It's a very profound part of our legal structure. And we've seen it attacked by the executive branch of the federal government. Of course, we've also seen it somewhat, at least seemingly protected by the federal courts, where the federal court says, well, you can't quite go that far, but you can go this far. And indeed, if you really look at those Supreme Court decisions during the Bush era, regarding Guantanamo in particular, we kind of see the Supreme Court saying, you can't do this without Congress. And then the executive comes in and says, we got Congress. The Supreme Court says, you can't quite go that far. You need a judge involved. And they say, well, we have judges. We created a tribunal system. And one thing that gets lost in all this is no one actually thinks about how habeas corpus was before, say, the mid-19th century. Everyone just assumes that, of course, habeas corpus, like everything else that federal courts do, is a function of the enumerated powers of the federal government. Right? I mean, we don't want the federal government, and including the federal courts, to have too much power. We want them to be limited. That was, in fact, the whole idea of the enumerated powers doctrine, right? And the 10th Amendment. But on the other hand, we kind of like the idea of the judge being able to say, hey, wait, are you detaining that guy properly? Now, the interesting, this seems kind of a paradox, and actually, if you look at English history, in England, habeas corpus didn't come about because of a bunch of libertarians in 1215. That's actually quite a distortion. It came about because of a bunch of opportunistic judges wanted more power for themselves. And in fact, many of the first cases of them exercising this power had little to do with the person being detained. They just wanted the money. They just wanted the case to go through their court. They're like, wait, you can't do that. We do that. And if you
So you heard that the origin of habeas really had more to do with opportunistic judges, political seeking judges, right? And look, I think most of us know, especially left-wing judges, from what we've seen with the Ninth Circuit, are highly political, irrespective of the history of the Second Amendment. They're doing everything they can to defeat your right to have a standard capacity magazine, to make your AR-15, the most commonly used rifle in the history of this country, illegal, just because it looks scary, right? And in Colorado, they're trying to ban all semi-automatic weapons based on that as well. It's ridiculous. Let's keep listening.
Look at the way habeas corpus got bigger and bigger in England. It wasn't quite as admirable as many people kind of make it out to be or assume it was. When Parliament finally adopted the Habeas Corpus Act, it was because the House of Commons was ordering the jailing of councils from the House of Lords. The thing that finally made them want to be able to protect their civil liberties, they didn't want to be jailed.
That's right.
Now, that sounds all well and good, but in America, it was different. People like to think, well, England brought us habeas corpus, the common law, the rule of law, the Magna Carta. This is largely bunk. I mean, the American people weren't big fans of English common law. They associated that with England.
Well, I take issue with him on one thing. The American people believe that they were English. What they took issue with is that the king, he swayed away from the Magna Carta. And so the Americans wanted to have what they felt was the original English common law, and based on natural law, John Locke. And so basically I agree with him, but I'm a little nuanced in the way I approach it. The American people, to a large degree, adopted common law, English common law, except where natural law and American principles abrogated the English law, because we know that the king did not believe, he didn't really want the commoners to have law. He had his own king's law, and he wanted everyone else to be subjects, very similar to the Federalists that we have today. And so the modern Federalist would be the Democrat, and the modern version of the Anti-Federalists, unfortunately, would probably be the Republican, but actually it's more the Libertarians like me. I would say that the Libertarian is the true Anti-Federalist, just so you can kind of see the differences and the nuances.
They had their own law, their own local law. But eventually they started to like aspects of common law because they liked the pro-liberty element. And so they started adopting things like habeas corpus on their own.
Hey, Lynn, good seeing you.
In the early 18th century, Queen Anne proclaimed that Virginia had habeas corpus, but the colonies were already practicing it. And by the time of the American Revolution, the Americans already had it. And when the Americans fought their revolution, one of the big complaints they had about the central state was, hey, you guys say you're for freedom. You Englishmen say you invented liberty, basically. And, there's some truth to it if you define liberty in terms of certain doctrines, right? I wouldn't say they invented liberty, of course, but, in dialectically. They said, you Englishmen say that you're all for the Magna Carta, but you're taking away our habeas corpus, you're stripping it from Quebec. This was a major grievance.
Yeah.
And so when the United States Constitution was born, who had the power of habeas corpus? Not the Supreme Court. We all did. Every courtroom in America had it on their own as part of American common law.
That's right.
And indeed, the Constitution says that they can't suspend habeas corpus except in rebellion and public safety and all that. And a lot of people say, yeah, there it is, right there in the Constitution. And they were horrified when Alberto Gonzales famously said, the Constitution doesn't protect habeas corpus, or it doesn't guarantee it, it just prohibits taking it away. And people said, that doesn't make sense. Well, of course it makes sense. Because like so many of our other rights, they didn't come from Washington, right? We had them. And it's only Washington that we wanted not to take them away. And what's really radical about all this is early in this republic, habeas corpus was one of the most powerful states' rights ever.
It's true.
In 1836, Massachusetts court freed someone from the Navy. And this wasn't considered odd. It was the federal government in America, not in England. It was the central state that was being checked from down below. Meanwhile, when habeas corpus got centralized, like in 1833, it was the first major time the Congress expanded federal habeas corpus. It was to protect their own. It was in response to the tariff of abominations, where in 1833, South Carolina said, we're going to start jailing people enforcing this tax. And the federal government said, nope, we're going to issue writs of habeas corpus to take them out of your jails. So it took on the centralist character. And of course, during the Civil War, during the slavery issue, where all these states had personal liberty laws and used habeas corpus to free people, and we had Joshua Glover freed in Wisconsin on habeas corpus. And the guy who stood up for him, Sherman Booth, the abolitionist, he was jailed for basically being an abolitionist and encouraging this. And they issued a writ, the Wisconsin court, and the Supreme Court overturned it and said, no, the states can't. The states don't have this power. 1859. That's the real death of American liberty. And then the Civil War, of course, Lincoln suspended it a dozen times almost with Congress. And after that, the federal government took this liberty from us and was supposedly our guardian. But during Reconstruction, when they passed the Habeas Corpus Act in the 1860s, it was supposed to protect people from state governments. And it did to some extent. But the first time they changed it, they went back on it. Habeas corpus was used to question the detention of someone who was jailed, named McCardle. And what was his crime? Criticizing Reconstruction. And from then on, the national government wasn't very good at making sure people weren't being detained unjustly. We had world wars with Japanese internment. We had the war on drugs. We had the largest prison population in the world. Per capita and in absolute terms, unless you count like the concentration camps, it's probably the biggest prison population ever. This is all spawned by federal policy. It certainly hasn't been reversed by federal policy. And this is what happened when the national government took over this powerful remedy. And it was a powerful remedy. So what's this all mean? What this all means is the conservatives who say, the Guantanamo decisions were bad because the Supreme Court shouldn't be meddling, they have a very narrow point. But what they don't realize is under the original Constitution,
Good, Lynn. It's good.
It's not up to just the Supreme Court and the federal courts what the military does at Guantanamo. It's up to the state courts.
That's right.
Under the original Constitution, under the way things were, and I think under the way that they actually are, if you read the law and you understand this history, the federal government's detentions are the ones that should be checked the most. And they should be checked by local powers.
Absolutely. Agreed.
I think that one thing that we often forget is that people do sometimes when they seem to completely disagree, they might kind of agree more than they think they do, and more than we think they do. But I think it's important to instill a little bit of this cognitive dissonance here. The federal police state is not our savior, and the federal courts do a terrible job at protecting our rights. Look, even let's say for the sake of argument that the federal courts do some good once in a while against state authority, just, broken clock. Well, look at all these erosions of Miranda over the last few years, all these erosions of the Fourth Amendment. By nationalizing our rights, we've given the greatest monopoly power on earth, the U.S. empire, the last say. And it was never meant to be that way. In fact, it's antithetical to the good principles of the American Revolution. And so I think that it really is an important time for these ideas to be catching on. And we have to find kind of new and interesting ways to spread them. And of course, many of us are, and this is one reason there's so many people here. But I think that if we just frame the discussion a little bit and look at all of these forgotten legacies of decentralism, we can really push the humanitarian vision that political decentralism and smashing the central state really represent. Thank you very much.
Very good, very good. So let me see. Looks like that video's over. Okay, so I like sharing different perspectives, and the 10th Amendment Center is definitely a channel that I think you all need to like and subscribe to. And by the way, since I'm in vertical mode, make sure to double tap the screen to get my likes in. But always, always, always save my videos for later. When I mean save, I don't mean just save it for later viewing on YouTube, but try to find a way to upload them, because we never know when the thought police are going to take down this channel. I mean, I'm sharing things that many people consider to be revolutionary, but when in fact it's simply a promulgation of what our founding fathers originally intended for this country, which is individual rights and freedom above the state. And the statists hate that. We have a new group of wokeists who are basically emulating the British model. Ban firearms for private citizens, ban parental rights. Only the king has the right to decide what a boy and a girl is, et cetera, et cetera. So the 10th Amendment Center really, really, really breaks it down much better than I ever could. Again, I'm a lawyer. I've been practicing law for about 20 years. And what I'm really doing right now today is this is just a promulgation of the series that I've been doing from watching Lane Myers and what's been happening with him, because he sort of presents an example of sort of the William Wallace, the bold, brash, sort of revolutionary, and how he's being, in my opinion, railroaded by the justice system. And look, granted, he may be out of line, right? He may be out of line from a point of view of being a nonconformist, right? But that doesn't give the state the right to just lock him up, in my opinion. And I am really, really hoping that some of these videos will give you sort of a taste of how I would approach it as a lawyer and how I would approach it as a pro per litigant. Um, so by no means am I saying that he has clean hands and he's the perfect person, but that's the whole point. Is we don't want a justice system that only helps people with clean hands and have the perfect angel personality. We want a justice system that's going to absorb and accommodate all walks of life, all opinions, all forms of personalities. We don't want a justice system that forces you to be like you're on a woke college campus like Berkeley, which unfortunately is where much of our legal class comes from. And that's the sad part. I was blessed to have become a lawyer on the law study program, where I was able to become a lawyer with no undergrad, with no law degree. And then later, after being a practicing attorney, I was able to see what it was really like. I ended up getting a Juris Doctorate from a law school. They waived my first year classes because I'd passed the baby bar, which was like less than a 10% pass. And I got to go on these on a law school, and I got to tell you, it was like 90% far left, woke, extremist. White guys are the enemy. Look, I didn't even speak up because I risked getting bad grades. I was so terrified because these professors were hardcore lefties, and so that is your judiciary. That is your legal class, right? Even the prosecutors were hardcore, like Obama supporters, anti-Second Amendment, defense as well. And it's like, so when I go into court, I recognize that that's who I'm dealing with. I'm not dealing with someone who supports, in my opinion, the original concept of natural law. You may find a couple of them maybe at the Fifth Circuit, maybe a few in the South, but I would say for the most part, you're not going to find too many justices or judges who are libertarians. They're usually very, very much pro-state, and they look at people like me as violent extremists or a radical right winger, which I'm not. I'm just a regular guy who wants to defend my family. Look, when the police are when seconds count, the police are 20 minutes away. It's your job as a man to protect your wife and kids, and allowing some woke public school teacher to tell your son he should be wearing a dress and he was really born a girl, you need to homeschool. Okay, so I'm considered to be a radical for professing that belief that parents need to get their kids out of that system, because young kids are impressionable, and that's precisely the reason why they're trying to get to your kids. And I've done shows about the public school system, how Rockefeller brought it over, how it was started by the King of Prussia to make people more compliant like sheep to the state, because he wanted a nation of workers, not of thinkers. And once you start homeschooling your kids, now you can start teaching them critical thinking, and they just watch you. And, I have my kids like learn how to do marketing, how to start their own business, because ultimately these people who get degrees in underwater basket weaving or African American studies or whatever it is that they get at these woke colleges, all that qualifies them for is a job at Starbucks as a barista. So you really need to think about, really, do you really think a degree is really worth anything? It's not, in my opinion. I think that the school of hard knocks, I think if you're a man, a boy, get a job as a plumber or an electrician, learn how to protect your family. Give me a bunch of ones if you guys agree. It used to be like, even when I was growing up, and more so in my dad's time, that the only people who really went to colleges were people who wanted to be an accountant, maybe a librarian, public servant, right? But for the most part, people got regular jobs and they were entrepreneurs. And we did not have a service-based economy, right? So all of our jobs and everything were outsourced to China, thanks in large part to guys like Nixon and Jimmy Carter, both crooks, in my opinion, NAFTA and Bush, all those guys. And we became a service-based economy. And so now everybody has to go to school, to a college. Why? Colleges are basically Marxist re-education camps, in my humble opinion. You'll send a reasonably educated, critical thinking young person into one of those campuses. They come out with purple hair, burning American flags, trying to torch Teslas, right? That is what you get on most college campuses, unfortunately. Say many people and parents who I've spoken to whose kids have all moved to like Berkeley or San Francisco, and they're just ruined. The woke mind virus has destroyed them. So let's get into the last video, and then we will call it a day, because I promised my daughter I would take her out. That's what you got to do, guys, when you have kids. If you don't give your kids attention, they will get it somewhere else. That's why a lot of young boys join gangs who don't have their dads around because they need support, they need mentoring, they need leadership, and if they're not getting it from their parents, they will find it from somewhere else. So now Nathan Stokes says, how can we be judged properly when the judges don't believe in the system they're working for? Can't break away society. Well, look, I'm a firm believer in forming parallel systems, right? So the way you do it is start homesteading, right? Homestead, grow your own food. Definitely homeschool your kids. Do not let them anywhere near a public school teacher. I mean, look, I've never met a public school teacher who was a libertarian or even somewhat conservative. All public school teachers I've met are hardcore lefties. I've not met one. Well, actually, no, I did meet one, and he ended up getting terminated from his job because the woke, education industrial complex didn't like him. And he ended up getting elected to a school board, and he got assassinated at the school board with Soros dollars, right? So they just do not want, look, they want people educating your kids, in my opinion, who hate America and who hate American values. So homeschool your kids, homestead, form parallel systems, buy from each other. Like, I'm a personal injury lawyer. If you get in a car accident, you should call me because I'm going to go to battle for you. If you have a company, if Dr. Shiva, has something, she needs some patients, you should be sending patients to her. Or if you need help, holistic medicine or healing, you contact Dr. Shiva. Whatever Life Under the Microscope's doing for a living, if he's in heating and air conditioning, or like Reluctant Prophet, if you're in Arizona, if you've got a problem with your heating or electricity, he's the guy you call. You do business with like-minded people and you build your own homestead around each other, and you can start your own municipal corporations, and you can do just like the Amish and the Mormons did, and you can form your own parallel system and elect the judges and elect the mayors and all these other people who don't steal your money. You elect people who know the law and mean to keep it well, in the words of St. Thomas Aquinas. If you elect immoral, corrupt people, if you elect someone who cheats on his wife, he's going to cheat on you, right? Look, I don't qualify in my mind to be a public servant because of my background. I was a carousing Marine. I wouldn't accept the job. I would want to find someone who I felt was of chaste character to be my public official, and I would definitely term limit them. And so what I'm saying is parallel systems are the key to all these problems that you're talking about, Nathan. So Nathan Stokes, give me a bunch of ones if you agree with that. And type in your own opinions. I want to hear what you have to say. I'm just a lawyer. I'm not I don't profess to be any smarter than any of you guys. I'm one of these guys who just never gave up. That I slept on park benches. I worked at a Home Depot on the night shift. Anything that I could do. I worked for lawyers for free for over 4 years. I ended up through just sheer will getting myself in a position where I could get an externship with the California Court of Appeal, and did amazing things that most people could only dream of. And it wasn't because I'm any smarter. It's because it's called The Power of the Will. There was a book by G. Gordon Liddy called Will. I recommend that you guys read it. Not that I'm a supporter of G. Gordon Liddy, but he definitely was right. What the mind can conceive and believe, the mind can achieve. And we can make changes to the government and to the administrative state. I mean, look at what Musk has uncovered, all the fraud and waste, like, these scumbag government employees funneling money to large corporations to take away our sovereignty, and then using that as an opportunity to get hired at one of those companies after they've already fraudulently sent money over to that company, how they flooded our country with over 20 million illegal aliens. Then you had Biden say, if you just pass this law, I can seal the border. And then within 30 days, Trump sealed the entire southern border. So we know that was a complete lie, right? And they spent billions of our tax dollars flooding our country with illegal alien criminals. When I was down in El Salvador, there were members, I believe they were Antifa, with hammer and sickle flags on their backpacks, passing cell phones around to peasants down in El Salvador, giving them maps on how to avoid border checkpoints and how to sneak into the United States, with promises of free food, free hotels, even a driver's license. And of course, we know that in all the liberal states that don't require voter ID, they're automatically registered to vote. And so we have illegal alien voters, but primarily it was done to try and redistrict the blue states because it's body count. They don't have to vote. So we know now that's how California went blue, is they flooded the state with illegal aliens, became a sanctuary state, and they used the U.S. Census to redistrict and get new representatives. And that's how California went blue, which was always a traditionally red state. I mean, how could it not be a traditional red state when it was all about entrepreneurialism, hard work? And that's how it was. It was mainly veterans. When I grew up in Orange County, almost all my neighbors were Vietnam vets. They would never vote for any of this woke nonsense. But it's the representative, so it's the U.S. Census. So they're still using the census to try and redistrict. And why? Because they know their ideas don't sell. Telling parents that they're bigoted because they don't want their son wearing a dress, telling parents that they're bigots because they don't want tampon machines in the men's restroom at a public school, that is not something the vast majority of Americans support. That is something that wokesters support on a college campus. And unfortunately, that's where much of your judiciary comes from, those woke college campuses. So let's get into this last video. This dude is super cool, and this is what I would recommend. Definitely Colorado, United States of America, Inc. Right on. Thank you, F. Arrah, kill, gung ho, gung ho. So this dude is super cool. His name is Bad Wolf Unincorporated. I already joined his channel. I'm going to drop the link too for y'all. But this is, if I was Lane Myers and I was in jail, this is the approach that I would take. So I want you guys to listen to it. I think this Big Bad Wolf is a cool dude. Hopefully I can get him to come on my show because he's one of these guys. He's kind of like a Lane Myers, but I think he's really legit. So I want you guys to check it out.
What's up, guys? This is not going to be a terribly long video, but I want to talk about some of my brothers and sisters out there who are incarcerated. I know you guys have been reaching out to me, hitting me up, telling me you've been watching the channels and all of that, so I definitely appreciate you. And for those people who asked for a little bit more of this information on how to help out their particular situation, now this is not for everybody, but I would suggest doing the research and checking it out. So what are we talking about? It's called Petition for a Writ of Habeas Corpus under 28 USC 2241. Okay, so this comes right off of uscourts.gov. Okay, so if you have been, it says who should use this form? If you are a federal prisoner and you wish to challenge the way your sentence is being carried out, you are in federal or state custody because of something other than a judgment of conviction, or you are alleging that you are illegally detained in immigration custody. Okay, so this can go out to help those people out there too. Google petition for writ habeas corpus under 28 USC 2241. Okay, and then type in .pdf. Okay. Other keywords you might want to throw in there would be like U.S. court and then GOV. That's going to bring you up to this page right here. This is what you need to help get you out of your predicament, those situations. So even if you're in there and you're like, I can't get that, I can't download that. Put that on the top of it. Hand write out what you are alleging that occurred. Okay. Then submit that to the guard or usually it's going to be a guard, obviously, but make sure to put attention on there to the warden or attention to, the attorney general via CO, the warden, because legally once you do that, they have to give them that information. Otherwise, they've just committed federal offenses because that's now a federal document that you were handing them. Even if it's on a napkin, even if it's on a piece of paper, even if it's on whatever, they have to deliver that. You have just addressed it as being basically a parcel of mail, and it has to be delivered. If they're caught not delivering it, you make that accusation, and it's on video that they didn't do that, they are in some serious situations. Okay, unless the whole thing is corrupt, and then in which case you're gonna have to try to get a letter out and whatever else. But when okay. So once you get this form, it's going to step you through what the filing fee is, which is usually like $5. But if you can't afford it, it talks about the fact here that they can't refuse it because you don't have the proper fee or that it's not in the proper format. It still has to go through. They can say, well, this is improper format. We're not. No, you put on there, even if you don't know the format, put on there.
Right. And just really quick, so I keep on harping on Balistreri versus Pacifica Police Department, Balistreri versus Pacifica Police Department. The Court of Appeals has a duty to ensure that pro se litigants don't lose a hearing on the merits of their claim due to ignorance of technical or procedural requirements. Very important to understand that. So, and he's basically sort of parroting that in his own way. And so, if you're procedurally, if you make a mistake on your pleading, if you're a lawyer, the judge could bounce it because I'm an officer of the court. So everything I do has to be perfect. But as a pro se or a pro per litigant, you don't. You just have to be able to present a prima facie or prima facie case in your pleadings as best as you can to where they understand it. So let's get back into the video.
By law, I can't afford it, and I know that it's legal to still send this in. It's not in the correct format. I know that by law it's still legal to send this in to represent me and my situation. So send it in. And then it's going to give you the proper format, where everything should be filled out. Sorry, you guys can't really see it too clearly. I apologize. But you fill out your name, where you're being held. Don't put in your exact case number. In the video, the guy was talking about, don't do that. I know a lot of people want to do that. Put in your name and your information and then submit it. So that's it, guys. Hopefully that helps you guys out. I know I can't be there to help some of you guys, and I'm also not the guy who really, I'm not a lawyer, not a liar, not any of those things. Sometimes called or referred to as an attorney in fact. But that should help some of you guys out in your situation. So peace, love, blessings. I will talk to you guys later. Don't forget to hit that bell, like, subscribe. Thank you for the donations. All amounts matter. And Black Site 32 has the rest of my information.
No doubt, no doubt. So, that was Big Bad Wolf. I dropped his link. And he's right. Look, and I've told you this before, even if you donate $1.99, it means a lot to me because I'm spending an enormous amount of time doing these shows, and I'm doing it as a labor of love because I care about people and I want them to learn about the law and how to uphold their rights. But look, any donation, even if you're like, more than anything, buy packs of memberships, because when you buy a pack of like 5 or 10 or 20 memberships, what YouTube does is it sends them out to other people who are like-minded based on the algorithm and gives them an opportunity to join Team MPE. And that enables us to build that network, that parallel systems network that I would like to create. I would like all of us to be buying from each other, doing business with each other. Even if we disagree on most things, if we agree on natural law, that our rights come from a creator and not from the state, and the state can't take away our rights because they come from God, that's really the main thing that I care about. I don't care if you're gay, if you're straight, none of that matters to me. Obviously, there's some things that do matter, as we've all spoken about earlier, but the main thing is if you have it in your heart that you believe that your rights don't come from man, that your rights come from your creator, then become part of Team MPE. And so when you buy those membership packs, it shoots it out to a bunch of other people and helps bring them in to part of our group. And then we can form our own, a kinship group, for a lack of a better word. And other people have done that before they had advertising. Before lawyers were allowed to advertise, they would join like the Freemasons, which I'm not a Freemason, but I'm just saying, we would have to form our own groups. And now advertising's so expensive, it's impossible. And guys that have shows like Lane Myers or Reluctant Prophet or This Is a Public Service. Look, I just donated This Is a Public Service, all of my earnings from this show that I got from donations, like $150, over to his show to support him because he's getting us news out. And so, this information is not free. It takes an enormous amount of our time. I'm spending, over an hour usually on these videos, sometimes 2 or 3 hours. And I'm sitting here with a sciatica. I'm standing here at a standing desk with sciatica in an enormous amount of pain. Right now, I'm just like craving laying on my bed on a heating pad right now. So anyways, I do appreciate all you guys joining me today. There's one other way you can support my channel. You can pick up a digital version of my ebook, even if you don't want a copy of it. It's called My Journey to Becoming a Practicing Lawyer with No Law Degree or Undergrad. and it's $19.99. And the way you find it is, well, you can click on the link that Life Under the Microscope put in the sidebar, or you can go to my YouTube channel under the description and click the drop down menu. And all you have to do is click on the PayPal link. And for $19.99, I will send you a digital version of this book. The book that I have in my hand is a paperback version, and this would cost so much money for me, plus shipping and handling and my time, which I don't have. I don't have a team of people to do this. I do this show all by myself and with a little bit of help from my kids. So that's pretty much it. So if you want to support the channel, I really would appreciate it. You don't have to do super chats. You don't have to do pay money to YouTube. You can get a copy of my book. So anyways, with that being said, guys, I'm just going to take a look real quick here. So United States of America says my great grandfather was a Freemason, and I've been asked twice to join. I know a lot of people who are Freemasons. I don't have any problems with them. There's not supposed to be a debtor's prison, Lynn Davidson says. I agree with that. No, it's okay, Kevin. Kevin says, I'm sorry I didn't catch you sooner. I was cleaning the garage. That's okay. That's why you save my videos, guys. And that really gives me an algorithmic boost. So like that, there's like a save for later button. Save every single video that I have. Go to every single short video that I have and like it and make a comment on it. That gives me algorithmic love, right? So that'll help it go higher in the search engines, which is going to help attract more viewers, which is going to help us grow that parallel system that I keep preaching about. Rome wasn't built in a day, but if you want to become part of Team MPE, help me promote the channel and show my kids too, like, hey, you could be an entrepreneur. You could take over Dad's channel. Teaching my daughter how to be a lawyer as well with no law degree or undergrad. She's homeschooled, and I'm hoping she'll have her associate's degree within the next maybe 12 to 18 months. So, hopefully she'll have her AA before most kids even get out of high school. And that's what you do, guys. So we just help each other and we try to help each other out. Let me see here. The same with doctors in reality. So Beyond Watcher says the same with doctors in reality. It's your health and they get paid. That's right. Not only that, but they get a kickback every time they, give you something. Like Big Pharma pays them a kickback. So there's a financial interest, right? They get a percentage of whatever they give you. So to me, that is criminal, in my opinion, as a lawyer. I think that's criminal because how do you expect them? I think it violates the Hippocratic Oath because now they have a biased interest in making money off of you instead of curing you. And I've never heard of anything that pharma has ever created that cures you. All I've ever seen them do is create things that treat you so they can continue making money off of you. And that's why I believe in holistic medicine, natural healing, and nutrition, like Dr. Shiva, right? So I believe your body has the power to heal itself. That's my personal belief. And I believe God created us with the ability for our bodies to heal ourselves. You get off all that garbage food that the government's selling you, that nonsense nutrition program where they're trying to sell you all this, tell you to take all this different food groups and they modify it all the time because we know they're wrong, all the grains and all this other crap that birds are supposed to eat. Anyway, so Brent Shimko says, I'll have a 5-acre homestead coming up soon in the 51st state. Hell yeah, coming up for sale. Well, that's pretty cool, dude. I'd like to hear more about that, Brent. So let me just say, I want to thank everybody, okay, because I got to get going. Thank you, United States of America, Inc. And you too, God bless you, F. Harry Burns, Beyond Watcher, Kevin Bionarski, Craig Whittingslow. Thank you for joining Team MPE tonight. Life Under the Microscope, as always, thank you for supporting Team MPE. Simba B, super glad you made it here today. Everybody say a prayer for Lane and his family that, he's protected and not hurt while he's in jail. Age Go, as always, appreciate you showing up. Lynn Davidson, Nathan Stokes. Yeah, all you guys are super awesome. I really appreciate your support. Before I got super injured, I would have 300 or 400 people in these chats. So I can tell I'm getting punished for not going live for like a month. Now we've only got like 50 people in here. So please make sure to go the extra mile and share my stuff, like and subscribe, hit me up and make sure that I'm going live. Even if I'm in pain, I'll pop a pain pill because I can see how important it is. Because when I stop doing these shows, my phone started blowing up with text messages, and I just feel kind of guilty about it. So anything you can do to help me support the channel to make it easier for me to do these shows, I would appreciate it, including donations, as well as getting a copy of my book, as well as ideas for future material. I mean, I get text messages all the time from people, hey, share this video, share that video. I can't share them all, but anything that I find that I think that I can adapt to, I'm going to share it, guys. So with that being said, make sure to like and subscribe, double tap that screen. Make sure to save. Again, save all my videos, all the shorts, all the lives, everything. Oh, and one more thing. If any of you guys are videographers or editors and you want to donate some time to help me create some videos where I take my lives and convert them into like video forms where we edit them down and whittle them down, I need help doing that. Because as you can see, I don't have hardly any like videos. They're all like lives and shorts. I need some help with the videos because that really, really helps get traffic to the site, to my channel. And that's super important to me. But anyways, make sure to like and subscribe, make sure to save, because we never know when the thought police are going to take down this channel. And with that being said, Semper Fi, do or die.